Yeah, hey, uh, come on. Hitting new levels of come on the bezel, the nine on the iron, the rock heavy metal. What? Yeah. Hitting new levels of come on the bezel, the nine on the iron, the rock heavy metal. Whoa, hey, yeah, yeah. Hitting new levels of come on the bezel, the nine on the iron, the rock heavy metal. Whoa, hey, yeah, yeah, hey. Hitting new levels will come on the bezel, the nine on the iron, the rock heavy metal, the fire and the power. I grind by the hour, we working on building the whole them in power. The sounds in the stars, mine is on Mars. Nigga like Tesla, lightning bars. Ain't down broke, man, I'ma go hard. Need a big house, big watch, big car. Need a big house, big watch, big car. Need a big bang, man, need to go yard. Living high fashion in the last days. I don't give a damn, man, let him eat cake. I don't give a damn what a hater gon' say. Hard to see an asshole got a fool getting paid. Getting revenue every time, make a wave. Red up like the water, cause we making these waves. Red up like the water with a gang like slaughter. Really on my mind live, I'm around high. Laughing to the bank while I'm stacking all these dollars. Getting real high while I'm blowing on this la-la. Putting numbers on the board like it was a aha. Praying to the pancake like it was a aha. Got the studio doing numbers like a trap house. In the backwoods, bending corners with a strap out. Hitting new levels will come on the bezel, the nine on the iron, the rock heavy metal, the fire and the power. I grind by the hour, we working on building a whole damn empire. The signs and the stars, mine is on Mars. Nigga like Tesla, lightning bars. Ain't down broke, man, I'ma go hard. Need a big house, big watch, big car.
All right, what up, what up, what up? So today's live is on this book right here, the Egyptian Book of the Dead. It's one of my favorite books out there. Got a lot of great illustrations on there and stuff like that. So yeah, it's definitely one of my favorite books. Uh, I read this book, I'm gonna say probably like 5 times, and the only reason why is because I always feel like I'm missing something when I'm learning about the Egyptian culture or civilization or the ancient Egyptians and stuff. And what's interesting is that there's you don't have to read so many books to understand um, the ancient Egyptian civilization. You got the coffin text, the pyramid text, and then you got the different translations of the Egyptian Book of the Dead. And as long as you read those three, you'll have a good foundational understanding of what that religion and stuff like that felt like and what they believed in and stuff like that. And then when you want to get into like the symbolism and all that other stuff, that's when you have to go outside of those books to find people who understood what those symbols and stuff like that meant. Um, One of the cool things that I learned about this one is that this one is the Papyrus of Ani, which came around 1250 BC, the 19th dynasty, and is the most complete and preserved example of the Book of Going Forth by Day. So that's another name that some people will call it is the Book of Going Forth by Day. Then you got it has about 190 spells overall. I've read different numbers with that, but for the most part, that's the happy median for it, and that's just according to what I've read. And then you got as just different. It's just basically about somebody's life going from their physical form to their afterlife, and then what they their journey to it. So not every single Book of the Dead is the same for everybody. I like to think of it more like an obituary, like when somebody passed away, they give you the who, what, wins, and all that other stuff, and whys, and stuff like that, and give you the history about the person. And everybody gets one and stuff like that. It's the same thing with the Book of the Dead. But for the most part, everybody that got one, it was either done in different ways and stuff like that. Everybody had their own journey. So you got the weighing of the heart in there, where you got Thoth in there that's about and stuff like that. Then what I like to say is that there's, like I said, there is not one single official Book of the Dead. So just because I got this one right here and I'm going over this one doesn't mean that the next one that has it is anything that they're identical or something like that. It's not going to be like that. Actually, this one that I have right here is a revised edition anyway. So if I wanted to match up what was changed up in there, I mean, I could go in there and do my due diligence on that if I want to. And the Book of the Dead is like a tradition. It's the same thing, like I said, like an obituary. It's a tradition that everybody gets an obituary. You know, somebody gets mentioned in the newspaper or on the news and stuff like that when they do those types of announcements. And then this version that I'm about to go over right now is just it's just the best surviving uh copy, I guess that's what they say. When you get it, you get really good sections of photos and all kinds of stuff in here. I got every section actually has. Here, let me show you real quick, and I highly recommend it. Every section comes with like what it says on the bottom, and then it gives you what the scroll was in the middle, and then the I guess the hieroglyphics on the top. So this is what I'm going to go over today, and that's why I like to always go and reference it when there's always a discussion about the Egyptian Book of the Dead, because of the fact that uh, I mean, honestly, it's just a good source. I mean, and that's why, for the most part, when I ask for a source, I always ask for the plate number, is because on the bottom, I want to point out is that it has the plate numbers on there. So when somebody says, "Well, the Book of the Dead says this is, the version that they've read," and I say, "Hey, can you tell me what plate number that is so I can see what my version says?" And they won't know. And what's also interesting is that, here, let me see real quick because I think I just seen it. Yeah, so it has a map key to the papyrus of it, so Avani. So let me show you. So this is actually pretty interesting. So it gives you a breakdown of the whole entire thing, and it's just I think it's a pretty big book too. It's not your average size book. It's a pretty big book. So, but I'm gonna go over these tabs. As you can see, I always have tabs on my books. Every single one that I do. Not too many on this one. And there's no reason for it. It's just a lot of my tabs sometimes deal with having to read the whole chapter. So, and I'm not gonna read the whole chapter. Um, But here we go. Here's the first tab. It says, in addition, our own presentation of the papyrus has been improved by rejoining the hieroglyphs across the gutter at the top of the page for the names of Geb on plates 3A and 3B, and Ayeket on plates 9A and 9B. Very minor aesthetic adjustments were made to plates 5B and 6A and 7B, and 8A and 8B and 9A. For ease of reference, we added A and B designations to the numbering of the papyrus plate. So it's just basically telling you what to look out for, how to read it and stuff like that. And then the next tab is just basically thanking thanks to a certain group of people. And I think the reason why I put that in there for the most part is because I wanted to look up each one of those people. So it's just like a thanks to, you know, individuals that helped contributed to the book and such. Um, So this is following the age of enlightenment, and tendency arose among rationalists to consider religions in the same sense as a philosophical system, as if all gods had been invented by some clever mind, along with accompanying dogma and ritual. In discounting this type of approach, we have the benefit of the empirical scientific work for analytical psychologists like Carl Jung, who himself concluded that they arise from the natural life of the unconscious psyche. And somehow adequate expression. Okay. So yeah, so it gives you a book to read, structure and dynamics of the psyche, and it gives you page reference, page 409. So it says, the next paragraph actually says, in other words, no man ever invented his gods. He experienced them. In a letter written in 1883 to an American clergyman, the renowned anthropologist Max Muller offered this opinion: nothing to my mind can be sadder than reading the sacred books of mankind, and yet nothing more encouraging. They are full of rubbish, but among the rubbish there are the old stones which the builders of the true temple of humanity will not reject, must not reject if their temple is to hold all who worship God in spirit, in truth, and in life. And then it gives you his book, The Life and Letters of the Right Honorable Frederick Max Mueller, page 135. So it's just quoting some other people. The next tab, it says Egyptology was still in its infancy in the late 18th and early 19th centuries. And yet, even with our current advances in the study of the Book of the Dead, there is still an inherent truth in Ehrman's conclusions about the funerary literature of Egypt. Many references within the various chapters were then and still remain abstruse. As Ogden Golet notes in his introduction, the complex fabric of ritual, myth, and magic woven throughout the text is just beginning to be understood despite a century's worth of translations and studies. So that's it. That's actually interesting. If such an exact exchange by Egyptians can be regarded as superstitious, should we then apply the same judgment against the early Christians who used the symbol of Chi-Rho in place of, and then it gives you the Greek name Christos, which is basically they're talking about Christ. Would we spurn? And then it actually says, would we spurn as superstitious as devout Jew wearing a yarmulke and reading the Torah aloud, reverently placing the word Adonai, Lord, for one of the names of the God considered to be sacred to utter? Then he says, of course, I think not to do so would be dishonor to those to those traditions and cut us off from the riches we can glean from attempting to understand their meaning and motivation. So too is our loss if the obscurities that abound in the ancient Egyptian religious texts are set aside summarily or forced into a specific mold as set down by modern scholars. That's pretty interesting. Let's see. Then the next tabs. Okay, that was just like the basic beginning. So I'm still in the. Hold on. Here we go. All right. The Book of the Dead was never meant to be a unity. The fact that it envisions both an Assyrian and solar afterlife demonstrates the impossibility of seeking a single message. The commentary is designed to introduce the non-specialists to the aspects of Egyptian religion which are relevant to the Book of the Dead. It does not pretend to be all-inclusive or the final word on the subject. So that's why everybody has different opinions. And then, all right, so one of the first tabs that I got for when I start this was actually the introduction hymn to the sun god Ra or Re. He says, "Hail to you, you having come as Khepri, even Khepri, who is creator of the gods. You rise and shine on the back of your mother, the sky, having appeared in glory as the king of the gods." Okay, so Khepri is the creator of the gods, according to plate 1 of the Egyptian funerary text. So there's not that many tabs in here, like I said. So this is going to be pretty fast. The next tab I have is, I belong to your company, O Horus. I have fought for you and have watched over your name. I am Thoth, who vindicated Osiris against his foes on that day of judgment in the great mansion of the prince, which is in Heliopolis. I am Busarite, the son of Busarite. I was conceived in Busarias. I was born in Busariah, and I was with the men who lamented and the women who mourned Osiris on the shores of the washermen, and who vindicated Osiris against his foes, so they say. So that's just interesting. Gives you a little. That's actually plate 5A. So you want to look into that, plate 5A, and that's the one. Oh yeah. So another thing that it has in here, it has section like a fold out. I can't really hold it up and show it because it's, like I said, this book is big, but there's like a little fold out in the middle of the book, and it's like it's actually the Declaration of Innocence before the gods of tribunal. And then it has, um, and then it just keeps going into to all of it. I always will say, get this book if you actually want to see what the Egyptian and the dead looked like and their journey and stuff like that through their pictures. You'll get to see exactly what it says. It says, "What does it mean? As for the cat, he is Ra himself." Okay, so as for the cat, for that cat, and the cat is in capital CAT. He is Ra himself, who was called Cat. When Sia spoke about him, he was cat-like in what he did, and that is how the name of Cat came into being. Okay, so Osiris, so Ra, because right here, let me see, Osiris. Okay, no, wait, let me read this. Otherwise said he will be Shu, making an inventory for Geb and for Osiris. Okay, so yeah, Ra-Re, he is known as a cat because he had what it says. It had cat. He was cat like in what he did. So if you ever hear about cats again, just know that was Ra. Chapter of knowing all the chapters of going forth by day in a single chapter by, and it just says in. He says yesterday, which is pregnant with the one who shall give birth to himself at another time belongs to me. Let me read that again. He says yesterday, which is pregnant with the one who shall give birth to himself at another time belongs to me. I am the one secret of Ba's spirit, who made the gods and gives offerings to Duat gods of the west of the sky. I am the steering oar of the east, the possessor of two faces whose rays are seen, and the possessor of clouds, one who emerges at twilight, whose forms belong to the house of mooring. Okay. O you two falcons of his chieftains of their councils, to he who here matters, you are the ones who lead the moored ones to the secret places, who drag in Ra, who follows from the upper place. Who are they talking about? Do I have to read this whole thing? Okay, it says, "O Ra, laugh, may your heart be sweet with your good truth belonging to this day." That's actually interesting. I'm gonna have to go back and read this after this. I'm gonna have to read this whole thing. I'll probably just do an article on that part and the reason why is because it says with the one who, because I'm actually doing an article on Jesus Christ, is with where it says in the beginning, who shall give birth to himself. So God giving birth to himself through the Virgin Mary. It's actually interesting. That's what popped in my head when I was reading it. I was like, dang, that just sounds like Christianity right there. I'm gonna give birth to myself through someone on earth or wherever, you know. So finally, for the Anai Papias in particular, Edmund Doddenlinger's short commentary in German, supplied with the Folio Society edition, was quite useful. Although I have found that I do not agree on several points of interpretation. Okay, Don Dillinger's study is a fine introduction to the iconography of the BD for those with no background in the subject. So he is, and this is by different people: Dr. Ogden Golet, Dr. Raymond O. Faulkner, Carol Andrews, J. Daniel Gunther, James Wasserman. So this one is actually by Dr. Ogden Golet Jr. This is his commentary. So he's basically saying, for those with no background in the subject, even though he doesn't agree with several points of interpretation of Edmund Dondillinger's short commentary, he still recommends people to go there. And that's what I like, is that, you know, you don't have to like somebody to learn from them. And you don't have to like somebody to share their good information. If it's all about sharing the facts, the truth, the information, then you're not going to go blocking people because you don't like what they say or what they did. If they got something that might help you out, or that might help others understand the information better, then and it's all about giving out information and knowledge, then you won't have a problem doing that. But people get so emotional with this stuff, and everybody wants to be the big man on the show, and all this stuff. They forget that you know. And I'll tell you right now, 99% of them that I know of probably didn't even read the text for themselves, or at least they skimmed through it, read it real quick, and say, "Yeah, I read it, but did you understand it? Did you comprehend what you're saying?" Because this person is literally giving credit to somebody that he says he doesn't agree with several points of interpretation. He still recommends that individual's work to the people, so that they and not just people who any type of people who are coming to the subject. So even though they might get some misinformation on it, he still not I'm not even going to say misinformation. That's a harsh word to say. Interpretation that's not agreed upon, he still says, okay, go look, check this out. And then, maybe that person that checks it out might be the person that gives out the right, might help them on their journey, right? Because, I mean, this stuff takes a lifetime of learning. Not one person can do all this stuff at one time. It says, for religious historians, one of the most significant developments in the pyramid texts, and I mentioned that earlier, is that they contain the first definite appearance of the god Osiris. At this point, the association of the deceased with Osiris is a royal prerogative. And that's why I said, if you read the pyramid text, the coffin text, and just one of the ancient the Egyptian books of the dead, this one I recommend, you'll have a good understanding, a foundational understanding of what is happening throughout the ancient Egyptian gods and stuff. I will always say, you don't have to read thousands of books, because those thousands of books that you've read, if they're all based off of one book, then you just really read one book. You just got 1,000 different opinions after that one book. I mean, shit, you put 2,000, 3,000 people in the room, there's going to be about 2,000, 3,000 plus one different opinions, because there's always going to be one person that's going to have two different opinions just because they want to feel different. So my point is that if you really think about it, just picking up the pyramid text, coffin text, and this book right here by itself, I mean, you get and any translation either, anybody, I'm not going to pick one over the other. And the only reason why is because going to cross-reference that to somebody else's work, which that's why I say it takes a challenge to it. Just because you read, I've read a different version of this translation, and it's actually on sacredtext.com, I think is what it is, sacred-text.com, I'm not sure. But you always have to read different versions of it. Sometimes I'll like these, I'll pick up one of these plates. If somebody brings it to my attention, I'll go grab this book, look at the plate, and then I'll go online and see what wording changed. No different than what I would do if I picked up the King James Version and the New International Version. I'll pick up the same scripture, go to the same exact scripture, and see which words were changed and which words were used. And then I want to see what the original version says, that what word it was actually used on. But it also says the view of the aftermath in the pyramid text seems to follow patterns that inform much of the rest of Egyptian mortuary literature. The afterlife was predominantly celestial, with an important subterranean complement represented by the Doet. In the pyramid text, however, the solar stellar aspects dominates. Many of these texts are concerned with the methods of getting up to the heavens, become an oxo there. So that's that part right there. Oh shoot. Okay, yeah, so that's pretty good. All right, so the next tab was the Papyrus of Ani. Like most Book of the Deads of the New Kingdom, was prefabricated product of infirmary workshop. Wealthy Egyptians appear to have provided for their burial well in advance of their demise. The coffin, the tomb, its decorations, and the majority of the objects that went in it were either made or contracted for before the owner's death. In the case of the Book of the Dead manuscripts, financial considerations were balanced against religious requirements in deciding what the papyrus would include. Judging from the one source mentioning the cost of a Book of a Dead, such documents could be worth approximately half the annual salary of an average laborer. Blank papyrus itself appears to have been relatively expensive. Most Business documents show traces of prior use. Only the wealthiest clientele could afford to have custom-made Book of the Dead papyrus in which a roll of fresh sheets would be inscribed and illustrated specifically for the purchaser. That's no different than what we do today. I mean, people go find their plot of land where they want to be buried at. And some people, they put a lot of money into it, so no different than what's today. And then a lot of people do prepare for their deaths. That's why we have life insurance and wills and stuff like that, right? That's you can look at it in that way. Let's see the next tab. Hold on. Let's see. This page, I think, is sticking. Yep, it is. All right. In Egypt, the history of illustrated text by no means begins with the Book of Dead. In fact, the very first hieroglyphic inscriptions on ceremonial tablets of the Archaic period, 3200 BC. Now, this is interesting to me. Y'all have always heard me say that the Sumerians are considered the first civilization because of their writing system that it dates to 3200 BC. And I always say that's what most scholars and academics say. But most of the scholars that date the Egyptian time frame, 1300 BC, do not consider them the first civilization. I've actually taken a class that actually says it goes back to 5500 BC, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. But let me read this one more time. In Egypt, the history of illustrated text by no means begins with the Book of the Dead. Okay, illustrated text. That's nothing no different than book of pictographic script. Remember, the Sumerian civilization started first because of their writing system being a pictographic script. That's what Bar-Ilan University Dr. Nili Samit says. Then you go in there and says, in fact, the very first hieroglyphic inscriptions. So hieroglyphs are what? They're a pictographic script. So they're a writing system, right? No different than the pictographic script that the Sumerians had, right? Inscriptions on ceremonial tablets of the Archaic period. And then it gives you a date of 3200 BCE. So that means in reality, if I know about the Sumerian civilization starting at 3200 BC because of their writing system of pictographic script, and I pick up this book and I go to page 158, and I know very much a lot of great information about the Sumerians, and I read this part and I see that number 3200 BC, and I'm reading those lines over and over again, that literally just tells me that the Egyptian civilization started at 3200 BC also, because their illustrated hieroglyphs were a type of pictographic script, no different than the Sumerians, right? And this gives you a date of 3200 BC, which Dr. Nili Samit says in Bar-Ilan University, which I had the luxury of taking a class, actually said the Sumerian civilization started at 3200 BC. So why is it that the Sumerians are still considered the first civilization? Can no longer be considered the first civilization because of a writing system, because we have a book right here that says otherwise, right? And it says the Egyptian. So I always say that I want to know what this person believes what a civilization is. Okay, what do they consider a civilization? And that's where the big part about, why the Sumerians are given the credit for being the first civilization. I've always said that I felt like the Egyptian civilization goes much further back than the Sumerians, and they're considered a civilization. And I always say that only because of the class that I've taken. And not only that is because most people who consider the civilization of the Sumerians to be them being first is because of a pictographic script type. So, but hieroglyphs is the same thing. So it just gives me a little okay, we just going to go with the Sumerians right now, just because this is what you say, until somebody says no, the Egyptians came. Because I don't know why people from Egypt, or why a lot of people don't argue the fact that the Egyptians came before the Sumerians. I know a lot of people that I have discussions with when it's about ancient aliens or anything like that, even with scholars and academics. And I mean, it doesn't matter who it is. They all say, for the most part, 99.9% of them will say the Egyptians. There are people that will say there are civilizations that are older, because you got the New Guinea thing that's on the coast. I think I said that right. And then you got different theories like Dr. Margaret Mead, who says the civilization could have went back 15,000 years because of a healed femur that she witnessed from evidence from a broken bone from one of the older species and stuff like that. So I mean, in reality, it's just to me, it's just um, what we gonna call a civilization. We can't sit here and argue about what a civilization is or what an advanced civilization is if we don't define what a civilization is in the first place and agree to the terms of what that makes what's that of a civilization. And another thing that gets me a lot of time is that everybody likes to use the word advanced civilization, which gets me wondering. Um, our civilization right now in 2025 is more advanced than what we had in the 1990s, and we can look at the computers and the fiber optics and all this stuff that we have today, the iPhones and all that. Just give it another 1,000 years and this is our living style is going to be archaic, and there's going to be another civilization that's going to be living differently than us. So and they're going to have advanced things. I mean, what makes, if the advancement of a civilization is because they had tools, was their tools needed for what they needed to do? Because you don't necessarily create a tool for something that for a job that's not there. You create a tool for a job that it needs to be done for. So you know what I'm saying? And you can figure out how to put this thing together, but taking it apart and using the right tool to do it makes a whole lot different. So the next tab is the Akh, AKH. If there was such a thing as hierarchy of souls in the next world, the Akh would probably be at the top. The term is frequently translated by Egyptologists as blessed dead. Although Akhhood is the ultimate goal of the solar conception of the afterlife, there is little that we can say about this form of the soul. We depicted in Egyptian art, the Akh only occasionally appears as a created ibis, the sign used in the hieroglyphic writing term of the term. As with other forms of the soul, the Akh is usually depicted as a mummy, the generalized form for gods. The word Akh means something like the effective one or the radiant one. As an Akh, the deceased was truly transfigured in an essentially incorporated state, having become a stellar or solar being. Unlike the Ka or the Ba, the Akh does not seem to have much to do with the earthly realm. Yeah, so this is interesting. So a lot of people always talk about the Ka and the Ba, but when I bring up this right here, they usually just say, no, we're just talking about this and that. And I'm like, well, you have to include that because that's part of it, because it gives you the Ka is next. Is perhaps the most commonly mentioned form, which is which the human personality could assume after death was the Ka. It would be over hasty, however, to translate the complex word simply as the soul. So when you want to talk about the Ka, that's just basically your soul. That's what it's saying. It says it would be over hasty, however, to translate this complex word simply as the soul. So what you know as the soul is that you could just basically say it's the Ka. Unlike the Akh, the Ka could exist separately from an individual's physical being while he or she was still alive. In this manner, the Ka could function as a person's doppelganger. So basically, your soul is, you own your doppelganger, right? The other you. In Egyptian reliefs and paintings, the Ka is shown standing protectively behind the king, acting as a sort of guardian angel in life. Now, what's interesting about that to me is the Ubadians. When the Ubadians are depicting their what looks like reptilian artifacts and stuff like that, you can see something standing behind it, which would depict the type of soul. So when I read this part right here, that's what I'm doing. So when I'm talking about the Ubadians, they are the first group of individuals or the individuals who inhabited the land before the Sumerians did. We get Sumer from the Sumerians, but the Ubadians are supposedly came before them, and they aren't considered a civilization, even though they had different artifacts and stuff like that. And some people even believe that the Sumerians and the Ubadians are one and the same. They just had the name just changed. But uh, examples of this sort have led to an interpreting or interesting interpretation of the Ka as the spiritual body within the physical body. The Ka is also represented as a pair of upstretched arms, frequently placed on a standard or offering stand and embracing food offerings. And when I think about that, I think of like what Jesus is. I know a lot of people argue about who Jesus is, but not everything is about the physical Jesus. It's also, symbolism, what this is talking about. In the plural, the term ka also can mean food, victuals. They frequently play on words. In this instance, the word play may actually derive from an inanimate quality of the ka. It was thought to represent the vital energy of a human being. Without ka, life was not impossible, as shown by a common euphemism. For death to go to one Ka, the Ka was the force which vivifies statues and images. So the Ka was the force which vivifies statues and images. Although humans seem to possess only one Ka, some gods were thought to have many Kas. The sun god and creator deity Re or Ra, for example, had no less than 14 Kas. These Kas are personifications of qualities such as strength, prosperity, nourishment, glory, respect, effectiveness, permanence, creativity, magical power. The most important of Ra's personifications were perception, author, authoritative utterance, and rightful order. And then you have the shadow. So a lot of people talk about the shadow. I always bring this up because when I first read this book, and I look at the shadow differently. I always think of this right here. So the notion that a person's personality or soul could be embodied in an insubstantial form of a shadow is not confined to Egypt, but perhaps appears in European culture as well. For example, in Peter Schleimil's Wundersame Goethe, I don't know how to say that name, a tale by the romantic German author Chamisso in the opera Die Frauen Abend Schatten. Several passages in the Book of the Dead talk of the deceased moving with the swiftness of a shadow, possibly reference to the speed with which a shadow is created upon the ground. The shadow is connected naturally enough with the sun and daylight. In many Book of the Dead papyri and tombs, the deceased is depicted emerging from the tomb by day in shadow form, a thin black featureless silhouette of a person. The person in this form is, as we would put it, a mere shadow of his former existence, yet nonetheless still existing. Another form of the shadow assumes in the Book of the Dead, especially in connection with the gods, is an ostrich feather, sunshade, an object which would create a shadow. So if you ever see an ostrich feather, you can start thinking about it being a shadow, and you can remember. You can always go back to remembering that. It's pretty interesting. I don't even remember reading that. The scene, okay, the scene shows. It says the scene shows. So let me see where it goes. Okay, so this is talking about, I guess, is the illustration that normally belongs to chapter 126. However, the accompanying text is one of the standard terminal rubrics for chapter 125, as the modern numbering system implies chapter 126 would normally appear directly after 125, yet its vignette is preceded by chapter 42. And then it says, okay, so it's just telling me what the I guess what's wrong with what they fixing or what they added on the next chapters. All right, so here we go. This is the Book of the Dead study on the web. It says there's an important scholarly website primarily devoted to the Book of the Dead and its study. Among other things, one can access photographic reproductions of a wide range of papyri. Insofar as this possible due to copyright restrictions, this website is part of Tonenbach Project at Bonn University. So I'm going to type this in real quick so we can go ahead and look at this together, because I know I didn't do this before. So let me see. And then I can screen share what it looks like. So it says TOTENBUCH.AWK.NRW.DE. Let me see. All right, yeah. So here we go. So yeah, so you're gonna have to change this into you're gonna have to change this into hold on, let me show y'all. Because that's the end of this book right here. So where's it at right here? Yeah. So this is it right here. That's the end of the book. Hold on, let me do something. My chair went down on me. Let's see. Let's make it bigger. All right, so yeah, you see how you gotta change the language. So when you go to it, I usually just there you go. Then here you go right here. Can the dead read? You got stuff. Let's see. The dating. Let's go to the Middle Kingdom and see what it shows. Okay, yeah, see, so it just gives you information right here. So I'm actually just gonna leave this up after I get off here. When later on when I come back in here, I'm gonna come and look at it. This is actually okay. So yeah, so you change up these little things right here, and it'll tell you. So let's click on one. Let's click on this. Oh dang! Translate to English. There we go. So you gotta keep making sure to change it into English. Yeah. So yeah, you can just object, shrine, stone, sandstone. Where's the? There's no link to click on no picture. Yeah, so but you can I guess you can do some of it. Let me see with images. Let's do this. Yeah, there we go. Maybe because that one was without. Let's do this. Nope. Still no images. I don't know. Yeah, translate to English again. All right, I'm gonna have to look into this then. Let's see. Let's click on this. I gotta find one. Yeah, you're gonna have to keep translating. I'm gonna have to change that on. Yeah, see, I hit with images and it brings up. Yeah, it brings up these things to internet downtime with images. Yeah. Okay, so I click on it. Nothing that I can see. I guess it just gives you a name, a spot where it's at. I don't know what happened. I'm gonna look into this, but yeah, this is the website right here that it tells you to that you can use for different things. Yeah, I'm gonna have to keep. Yeah, I'm gonna fix that. The Book of the Dead. Click on it more. Then you got to do it again. It gives you the Book of the Dead. It gives you all the information. Like I said, the Book of the Dead contains about 200 sayings, and additionally supplements them with illustrations, so-called. So yeah, all this right here. So yeah, check it out. So yeah, that's it right there. That's the book. I'll probably go live again Friday, or Friday or maybe Monday. I don't know. But I appreciate everybody for coming in and listening. That's the Egyptian Book of the Dead. That's the basics of what I have in there. I didn't read any of the real illustrations in there because it takes away from it, because you got to read it in full. and stuff like that. So I recommend getting that book. Like I said, it's a pretty big book. It's not a small book. So, and that's putting it towards my closer to me. It's a pretty good book. I highly recommend getting it. Like I said, so check it out. Appreciate everybody for listening. Until next time, you know what I always say. I say it every single time. Knowledge is power.